6 weeks before Claire's bakery opened, she sat alone at her kitchen table at 11 at night, staring at a number on her laptop screen that made her stomach drop. Not because the number was bad news, because if she hadn't found it that night, it would have been the kind of bad news that shows up 3 months into a business, when it's already too late to do anything but watch the savings disappear. We'll get back to that number. First, you need to understand how she got to that table in the first place, and the one question, borrowed from a 99-year-old billionaire, that most people never think to ask before they hand over their life savings for anything. Claire was 28, 4 years into a marketing job that paid the bills without ever feeling like hers. Every morning on her walk to the train, she passed an empty storefront on the corner of her block, a narrow space with big front windows, a for lease sign that had been sitting there for months, gathering dust that somehow made it look more inviting instead of less. She'd been picturing a bakery in that window for almost 2 years. Display cases, the smell of bread by 7 a.m., regulars who'd know her by name the way she'd once known the woman at her favorite coffee shop back in college. She'd been saving toward it quietly the entire time, watching the number in a separate account climb a little every month, telling herself she'd know when it was enough. One Tuesday, walking past that window on her way to work, she stopped. Really stopped, for the first time in 2 years of just glancing at it. The lease sign had a phone number. She called it before she'd even finished her coffee. By that Saturday, she was standing inside the space, empty except for dust and a few leftover shelving units from whatever business had been there before. The landlord walked her through it, pointed out where plumbing already existed from a previous cafe, mentioned the lease was negotiable if she moved fast. Claire stood in the middle of the empty floor, picturing it exactly the way she always had, and felt something settle into place in her chest that felt a lot like certainty. That certainty followed her to dinner with friends a few nights later. She told them she was seriously considering it, not just dreaming anymore, actually considering it. And the table lit up. Someone ordered a round of drinks to celebrate on the spot. "You've been talking about this for years," one friend said. "Life's too short to keep just talking about it." Another leaned in, genuinely excited for her, asking about flavors, about opening day, about what she'd call the place. It was warm. It was real support, the kind you actually want from people who care about you. And Claire noticed something in the middle of all that warmth, almost by accident. Not one person at that table had asked her a single hard question. Not what happens if the first few months are slow. Not how long her savings would actually last if things didn't go the way she pictured. Just encouragement, wrapped around excitement, wrapped around more encouragement. Walking home that night, her sister called. "I heard the dinner went well," her sister said, a little breathless, clearly walking somewhere herself. "You have to move on that space. Landlords don't wait around forever, and if you lose it to someone else, you'll regret it for years." Claire could hear something underneath her sister's urgency. Her sister had her own stalled dream sitting in a drawer somewhere, a photography business she'd talked about starting for even longer than Claire had talked about the bakery. Some of that urgency wasn't really about Claire's timeline at all. It was about watching someone else finally reach for something, and wanting that so badly for her that patience started to feel like the enemy. "I know," Claire said. "I just want to actually think it through first." "Think what through? You've thought about this for 2 years. Claire didn't have a clean answer for her in that moment. She just knew, the same way she'd known plenty of times before in her life, that the version of a decision that feels the most exciting in a group of people who love you is not always the same as the version that's actually sound. And she had one habit, quiet and unglamorous, that she'd relied on for years without ever making a big deal out of it. That night, alone at her kitchen table, laptop open, cold tea going untouched beside her, Claire did the thing she always did before any decision this size. She didn't ask herself how the bakery could succeed. She'd already spent 2 years imagining that part in vivid detail. Instead, she asked herself a different question entirely. What would actually make this fail? This is the part worth slowing down for, because it's not really about bakeries at all. There's a concept, popularized by the investor Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's longtime business partner, called inversion. The idea itself is old, older than Munger, traced back to a 19th century mathematician who used to say that difficult problems are often best solved backward. Munger took that idea and applied it directly to business and money decisions for most of his career. Instead of asking, "How do I succeed at this?" you ask, "What would guarantee failure here?" And then you build your plan around avoiding those specific things, one at a time. Munger himself put it simply. He said he wasn't especially interested in being brilliant. He was interested in reliably avoiding being stupid, because over a long enough life, that alone puts you ahead of almost everyone else who's busy chasing brilliance and stepping on the same obvious mistakes along the way. Claire had read about this years earlier, in a book she barely remembered the title of now, and it had quietly become the one financial habit she never skipped. The same way some people never skip locking their front door. Not because she was pessimistic, because she'd learned, small decision by small decision, that the exciting part of any plan takes care of itself. Nobody forgets to imagine the win. It's the failure modes that get skipped, precisely because thinking about them isn't any fun. So that night, she made a list. Not vague worries, specific, concrete ways a small bakery actually fails, the kind she could find written about again and again by people who'd actually lived through it. Underpricing the rent relative to how many customers she'd realistically get on a slow Tuesday in February, not opening day. Running out of savings before the business had time to build any kind of regular customer base, since almost nothing in food service turns a real profit in the first few months. And the one that actually made her stomach drop. The number she was staring at when this story started. The total cost of health insurance she'd be paying entirely on her own the second she left her job. A number she had genuinely never once priced out in 2 years of picturing display cases and morning regulars. It wasn't a small number. Stacked on top of slow early months and a rent she'd already fallen a little in love with, it meant her savings, the number she'd been so proud of watching grow for 2 years, would realistically last about half as long as she'd assumed it would. She sat with that for a long time that night, the kind of quiet, uncomfortable sitting that doesn't feel good in the moment and matters enormously later. A few days later, she went back to the empty storefront, this time with her sister. Not to back out, just to show her the numbers, laid out plainly on a single page, the same way she'd have wanted someone to show her. Her sister read through it slowly, the urgency from that phone call fully gone now, replaced by something quieter. "I didn't even think about the insurance thing," she admitted. "Neither did I, until Tuesday," Claire said. They stood in that empty space together, and instead of talking about paint colors or a name for the place, they talked through a smaller opening budget, a slightly later start date to build a few more months of cushion, and a plan for the slow season Claire now knew was coming instead of hoping it wouldn't. None of it was as fun as the dinner conversation had been. It rarely is. But by the time Claire actually signed the lease, 6 weeks after that night at her kitchen table, she wasn't just excited anymore. She was excited and prepared, which turned out to be a very different feeling from excited alone. Opening day came on a cold morning in early spring. The display cases she'd pictured for 2 years were finally real, glass fogged slightly from the warmth of the ovens behind them. It wasn't a flood of customers. It was a modest, steady stream, exactly the slow start she'd already planned her cash flow around instead of hoping to avoid. The insurance bill hit her account the same week, expected this time instead of a surprise. None of it felt like crisis. It felt, oddly, like nothing much at all, which was exactly the point. A friend from that celebratory dinner stopped by a few weeks later, ordering a coffee, glancing around at the quiet Tuesday morning crowd. "Feels like it's going well," she said. "It's going the way I actually planned for," Claire said, which is better than going well by accident. Months later, Claire started looking at whether to bring on a part-time employee, freeing up a few hours a week for herself for the first time since opening day. Before she posted the job listing, she sat down at that same kitchen table, same habit, same question. Not, how does hiring someone help? What would make hiring someone a mistake right now? She found one thing. She hadn't yet built enough of a cash cushion to comfortably cover a slow month with an extra paycheck attached to it, and she adjusted the timeline by 6 weeks instead of ignoring it. Nobody taught her to do this. Nobody stood over her shoulder, making sure she asked the hard question before the exciting one. She just kept doing it, quietly, the same way she always had, long before anyone else in her life understood why it mattered. Because here's the actual truth underneath all of it, the one worth carrying into whatever decision you're facing right now, big or small. Almost everyone around you will be excited about your win before it happens. That excitement is real, and it's a genuine gift. And none of this is about avoiding people who believe in you. But excitement was never designed to find the hole in your plan. Only one question does that, and it's the one almost everyone skips, because it's the least fun question in the entire process. Before you sink your savings into anything, a business, a big purchase, a bet on yourself, ask what would actually make it fail. Not to talk yourself out of it, to walk into it already knowing where the ground might give way, instead of finding out the hard way at 11 at night with far less time left to do anything about it.